when I was a sophomore in college, I went to the hospital for what doctors thought was viral meningitis. All I remember are the spiritual experiences that I had. Had an encounter with God and an encounter with Jesus. So fast forward, I'm in the hospital. Everything is just blackness. Yes, I was on morphine. I was on Tylenol with codeine, and I was on Percocet and whatever other pain medication they may have been giving me. I don't know. So there's no recollection for me really of being in the hospital. All I remember is everything is just blackness. And then I all of a sudden am in the presence of God. I know that I'm in the presence of God because it's like just instantaneously I knew. And prior to this experience, I always thought that when you were dying, you would have kind of this panic moment where you're like, am I going to heaven? Am I going to hell? What's happening to me? None of that happened. It was instantly, I'm in front of this brightest, whitest light you could ever even imagine. That I remember thinking like, if I was seeing this with my like physical eyes, I would be blind. And not only would I be blind, I would just disintegrate and be completely burned up and consumed by this light. So I immediately knew that I was in the presence of God. And I said, God, am I dead? Am I dying? Because I was in so much pain, and like I was just in so much pain and so out of it in the hospital, right? I was just wanting to know. And the Lord responded to me in question and said, well, tell me why you think that. And I felt frustrated because I just wanted to know what was happening. And I said, well, God, am I dying? Yes or no? And he said, just in the most loving way, tell me why you think that. Why do you think you're dying? And I said, God, just tell me if I'm dead. Like, is this it? Like, am I dying? Yes or no? Like, am I dead? What's going on, basically? And he said, tell me why you think that. Just still this calm, still, loving voice. And I said, well, I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't go to the bathroom. I'm basically just laying here. I can't communicate with anyone. Like, what's left for me to do? Like, all I'm doing down here is breathing. And he said, all right, you can come here, but if you do, this is what's going to happen. And I think it's very interesting that he seemingly gave me a choice. And everything was like happening in an instant. And also we were speaking in a telepathic way, and it was instant. Everything, it was like it was happening all at once. And I still was totally me, but not talking like this. It's like God just knew all of my thoughts, never saw his face, I'm just in front of and surrounded and consumed by this bright, like whiteness I can't even describe. Instantly, we're in this space, and I start to see kind of like we're hovering, and I know that there are friends and family over here, but I can't make out like who they are or anything. And then I see 2 projection screens. And then I noticed that on those projection screens, there are pictures of me playing from when I was a little girl up until this point in time, where I'm around 19 or 20 years old at the time. And then I noticed a man walking up like from the wing here, like onto a stage. And it kind of hits me all of a sudden that we're in my home church that I grew up in. And oh my goodness, like God is showing me my funeral. And then we zoom in over, it's like we just go whoosh, and we're right on top of my parents. And they're like hugging each other, holding each other, crying. And I felt super upset in that moment, but not for reasons that you would think or even make sense to me now. I felt such an overwhelming sense of love and peace in the presence of the Lord that I didn't want to leave. So I always thought that when you were experiencing death or dying, that you would be like, oh my gosh, especially at 19 or 20 years old, like, oh my gosh, Lord, like I haven't gotten married, I haven't had kids, like I haven't graduated college, I haven't done anything I want to do, like I have so much life to live. Let me, go back and like plead with him. I wanted to stay in his presence, and I wanted to enter into heaven or go wherever he was going. And so I felt this overwhelming sense of like sadness and anger and frustration. Like I knew in that moment when we were on like over my parents that God was telling me that I needed to go back, and I didn't want to go back. And so I said to him, I was like, okay, you know, Lord, I've seen enough. Like I understand. And so he took me away from there again, like instantaneously. And I didn't ask him to heal me overnight. What I asked him for is I said, God, I understand what you're saying. Because remember, he had like given me this choice. Like, you can come here if you want to, but if you do, here's what's going to happen. He showed me the pain of my parents. And I said, I understand what you're telling me. In 3 days, I would like to either be back in my right mind. I was asking him to be able to communicate, like that I could open my eyes and speak as myself in my own right frame of brain and being, like just as a human being. Or I want to be dead. Like I want this to be completely over with in 3 days. And God said, all right, 3 days. And the next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital fully in my consciousness as I am now. And my granddaddy was on the side of my hospital bed looking over me, and he like just got tears in his eyes because I looked at him and I said, hi. And he's like, she's back, she's back. And that was like a crazy experience and really impacted me in a lot of ways. And then the other thing I remember from while I was in the hospital is, again, everything was just like blackness. And all of a sudden I went into my right state of consciousness, but I still couldn't like communicate with anyone. It was just on the inside of my head. I started to come into a consciousness, and I had this feeling that something bad was about to happen. And my parents, I remember hearing them praying over me, and I was thinking like, something's not good here. Like something's going really wrong. And it turns out I was having a spinal tap done, getting ready to have a spinal tap done. And I remember being like wheeled back to the spinal tap, and I'm like on the hospital bed like this, and opening my eyes and looking down the hallway. And down the hallway, I can see this man, and he's in full blue doctor's scrubs, like the mask, the shoe covers, the whole thing. And he's walking towards me. And as he's walking towards me, he walks like this with his palms this way. And as he gets closer, I can see that there's deep tissue scarring in his hands right here. And for people who will say like in his wrist or whatever, this is what I saw, and this was my experience. So there's deep tissue scarring in his hands right here. And it immediately, when I see that, I start to just recognize something different. And the doctor walks around to the side of my hospital bed, and I turn, my body in the natural is still facing this way. And I turn and I look at him, and we lock eyes. And I cannot describe to you that feeling. It sends a physical response through my body, even recalling it. Immediately when we locked eyes, I recognized this is Jesus. And I recognized that I'm not in my physical body. I'm face to face with him. And all I could see is his eyes because of the mask and everything. And he turns towards my body, and he puts his hands like this, hovering over my back. And he lowers them and he touches me. And the only way I can describe it is it felt like Jesus Christ had touched me. And I can't explain it. It's inexplicable. They told me after the fact the spinal tap took like an hour. Guys, I promise you, it was like it took 5 minutes. And the miraculous thing was that my body remained still the whole time. Because the whole time I've been in the hospital, it was like I couldn't move my neck or anything. If they tried to move me, I would like scream and start like projectiling bile and stuff. But I hope this could encourage someone. I don't know. I hope that helps you in some way.